Recognized Uncle Walker D01. Recognized Emily of Arden D12.
Hello, team. Thanks for joining us for episode 18. It's episode 18, Emily, of Whelmed, the Young Justice
What?
Files.
How?
Season 2. Welcome to the warehouse. My name's Rich, and I'm here with my, as I just said, co-host Emily.
Hey, everybody.
Oh my gosh. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can find us on Twitter at the YJ Files, on Facebook at Crashing the Mode, on our website crashingthemode.com, on theyjfiles.tumblr.com, and at our email address whelmedpodcast@gmail.com.
Congratulations, Jaime Reyes.
All right, like you're happy about this. I am, I swear.
If this mistrust is your only takeaway from our time together, you haven't learned a thing.
And with that housekeeping out of the way, let's hand it off to Emily for...
Hello, Megan.
The title of this week's episode is Intervention. The release date was March 2nd, 2013, just 1 week after the previous episode. The in-episode date is May 30th, and then we jump to June 13th through 14th. We jump a little bit there. The director is Mel Zwire, and the writer is Peter David.
Special guest voice credits. We actually just have Rocket gets a new actress playing her this season, or for the rest of the season, and it's I'm gonna totally mangle this, and I'm so sorry. Denise Butte, not sure. Boutte. I'm not familiar with her. Sorry if I've mangled your name. Come on the show, talk to us about it. And that's pretty much it. Everybody else is pretty straightforward.
It's interesting because Rocket appears in this episode and in episodes previous in this season and later, but this is the only one where she talks, I think.
Huh. It is interesting. Let's get on with the mission briefing.
Indeed.
Just in time for your next mission.
In our pre-credit scene, we open on Mongul and Black Beetle continuing their fight after the team escaped last episode. Green Beetle soon arrives and helps Black Beetle put him in stasis. Black Beetle soon realizes that the crystal key had been stolen during the fight, and then we cut to the warehouse where the team is returning from that fight. Before Impulse can start a conversation about what to do about Blue Beetle, a news broadcast shows that Blue is apparently being honored for his help in stopping the war world.
Our post-credit scene is in Metropolis. We get our first look at the Young Justice version of Toyman, classic Superman villain. Blue arrives, and Toyman pines for the days of fighting Superman instead of the hero who took down the war world. We also get to see Jaime's perspective, finally trapped inside his body, arguing with the Scarab, and, interestingly enough to me, with the Reach ambassador.
Yeah. We then cut to McGann arriving in Poseidonis? I don't know how you pronounce the name of the city.
Poseidonus is how I pronounce it, yeah.
Awesome. And she's there to pick up Lagan, hoping to use the trip back home to talk about some things.
Always good.
We then cut back to Blue Beetle arriving in El Paso, where Batgirl and Impulse try to capture him, but fail and are nearly murdered by Blue, who is being controlled by the Reach, when Rocket actually traps him and in a energy bubble, in one of her energy bubbles, that's reinforced by Zatanna's magic. And then we cut back to McGann and Lagan on the bioship, where McGann breaks up with him.
Long, complicated scene, very straightforward description.
I have feelings about it. We'll talk about them later.
We'll talk about feelings. Meanwhile, Rocket, Zatanna, Batgirl, and Impulse fly Blue to the Bialyan base that Batgirl and her team discovered in Beneath. Shimmer, Mammoth, and Devastation attack the team to try and stop them from infiltrating their base, but are quickly trapped. Perhaps a little too quickly.
Maybe. Zatanna and the group then prepare a kind of ritual using the runes and the ruins, because Rich likes to write puns sometimes, when Green Beetle arrives on the scene. Batgirl, Impulse, and then Bumblebee, Wonder Girl, and Robin arrive to help distract Green Beetle, while Zatanna and Rocket focus the ritual and containing Blue. Zatanna then summons the power of the sorcerers who originally took Blue's Scarab off mode and manages to repeat the process, allowing both Green and Blue to regain their control.
We learned that Batgirl had taken holographic scans of the ruins during Beneath, the episode Beneath, and Dr. Fate managed to translate the hieroglyphs, uncovering the ritual that took Blue off mode 4,000 years before. Dr. Fate and Zatanna then worked together to prepare the ritual over months, while Batgirl and Robin hacked into old files of Ted Kord's. We discover that a character named Dan Garrett, an archaeologist, discovered the temple and the scarab in 1939 and became the first Blue Beetle. Ted Kord came to realize after Dan had passed away that the scarab was alien in origin, not magical, like Dan suspected, and refused to allow an alien piece of technology to fuse itself to his spine for some strange reason. Good call. He still became the second Blue Beetle, just using his own developed technologies and without the scarab's help. He then discovered that the Light wanted the scarab back in play, so kept it from them, but was apparently assassinated for it.
We then cut back to Bloodhaven, where Nightwing, McGann, and Lagan get the update about what happened in Bealia. When McGann asks about Connor, Nightwing replies that he said something about going out with Wendy Harris. And then back in Bealia, we discover that Queen Bee ordered her minions to throw the fight against the team to let them get Blue and Green off mode. It's all part of her plan, apparently.
It's always part of the plan. All right, Aster time. Let's do this.
Superboy, are you alright?
I'm fine. Feeling the Aster.
I have a lot of little things here. I love how the crowd, when Blue shows up at the beginning, is totally split about their opinions. Like, the Reach sucks, or whatever that guy.
I love it too. I love that there's one guy.
There's that one guy. I think even that guy later on, he's like, I guess the Reach is okay. You know, after he like saves him or whatever.
Yeah, I love it. I love those little details.
I try not to think too much about poor Jaime being trapped inside his own body. The idea is actually horrifying, maybe because I work in the medical industry and in ICUs, and it's just that whole idea gives me the heebie-jeebies. But also with Blue, this is where Beetle's actions start being very different than how he's been since Green put the Scarab back on mode, and I have no idea why that is, and it actually bugs me a little bit, and I'm hoping someone, because when things have bugged me in the show, and I have voiced on the show, people have pointed me in, I don't know, Ask Greg's or corrected me, and I felt much better. But in this case, like, it seems to be implying that the ambassador is speaking for Jaime all the time.
Yeah.
We talked about this a little bit in a previous episode, like, but he's been acting like Jaime, like perfectly like Jaime, nothing suspicious. If he had been acting like this in episodes beforehand, we would have known something was up. It's just way too over the top.
This episode brings up so many questions about like what the hierarchy of controlling Jaime is, because I feel like, like with, I think I might have mentioned it in a previous episode, it feels almost like in earlier episodes this season after he's been put back on mode that like the Scarab is just influencing him and making sure that he does what they need him to do.
Right.
And then here it's like very clearly like everything he says is being controlled by the Reach Ambassador. So I'm like, was there some level of like eventually the ambassador just took over or what? I want to know. And what happens like when the Reach Ambassador and Blue Beetle are in the same place at the same time? Because that happens multiple times.
Yeah.
So like who's controlling Blue then? How does that work? I have questions.
And if that's the case, then maybe the Reach Ambassador can just control him at certain times. But again, it's like there's like he was flying home and the Scarab was saying like we're on our way to your home or whatever, and he's like, nothing's more uncomfortable than watching you two try to act like me in front of my parents. Yes. Which means like why would the ambassador bother unless he was just like messing around if he didn't have to control Jaime. So there's definitely some questions there. But there's a bunch of subtle stuff happening with the Scarab in this episode.
Yes.
For the entire season so far, the Scarab has wanted to plasma cannon everyone. Impulse, like Ty's mom's boyfriend, to the point of even like manifesting the cannon, right? Until Jaime talks him out of it. But now Jaime has no control over the Scarab. Like the Scarab has theoretically full control over what's happening himself. and he's fighting Batgirl and Impulse, and instead of like stapling them through a major bone or whatever that he recommended earlier in the season, he instead pins them. And then what's really telling is that it knows that the alien race called the Cooperative's technology is powered by kinetic energy. It knows that. So when it got captured and it started pounding on that thing with like a mace, it's making it look like it's trying to escape, but doesn't actually do anything effective until it is directly ordered to by the scientist. Meaning that it was trying to get away with it. It was trying to appear to the, the reach that it was trying when it really knew much better than that, which I find really interesting, which leads into later on in the episode with the whole, if this is the only thing you've gotten out of our time together, line, which I think is really, really cool. Yeah. So I don't know what the hierarchy is, to answer your question, or to answer our question. I just don't.
Yeah. It's one of those things where I'm like, I try not to think about it too hard, because then I'm overanalyzing an alien controlling a bug-themed artificial intelligence on a superhero cartoon, and I sometimes need to let things go.
No,
just a little bit.
No. You do when it's some other show.
I don't want to let it go. I want to know, but I also feel like...
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, other shows want you to not think about it too much because they don't want to fix the problem. Young Justice tends to fix the problem. Right. And usually, like I said, it's something that I just overlooked. Right. And somebody else points out or something like that. But I thought it was really cool that they actually brought in Dan Garrett, because I think not a lot of people know that like Ted Kord was not the first Blue Beetle in the comics or in history. The Blue Beetle character is as old as 1939. So he was created in 1939, had his own comic series, and had like a 48 episode radio serial back in the day. I've listened to a whole bunch of the radio dramas. He was like a police officer, and he had like some like chainmail body armor or something that he used, and he used to take, I think it was like, the 30s. It was like vitamin 2X or something like that he would take. And it would make him like, give him boosted super energy or whatever. I think it was just a caffeine pill. I'm not sure. So
drugs give you superpowers,
I know.
Kids.
Well, let's not get into, there's a character called Our Man from the Justice Society who could take a pill and it would give him superpowers for an hour. And there's definitely been a few stories told of how that didn't go well for him in the long run.
There's Cloak and Dagger from Marvel Comics, whose legit backstory is drugs gave us superpowers.
Drugs gave us superpowers, yeah.
Like, we're not popular with parent groups.
No, not so much. But they're going to be have their own show on Freeform, so that's pretty funny. Yeah, but Dan Garrett, interesting character, and like the way that things, that the rights to that character kind of fell away, and they sold him to a comic company called Charlton. And Charlton tried to do a few things with the original Dan Garrett and then reinvented him and created the Ted Kord character. And then Charlton Comics, which also, if I remember correctly, was the creator of the original Captain Atom character that you see in the Justice League, was also in Charlton Comics. I think I own some of those, actually. And those characters ended up getting purchased by DC Comics along with some other companies like that owned like Shazam and some other things. And then after the Crisis on Infinite Earths, massive crossover in the late 80s when they mashed all of the many multiverse worlds into one, then those characters all kind of came to Earth and were incorporated into the overall universe. So yeah, it's kind of cool. You can actually find, if you just type in Dan Garrett Blue Beetle or Blue Beetle radio serial, you can find them for free out there. And I love listening to old radio serials anyway, so it's pretty fun. But there's actually something that I discovered literally while we were prepping this episode just like an hour ago.
I got to witness it happen, guys. Rich is very excited.
Definitely one of those moments where I'm just like, no way. If you guys remember hearing me talking about, Corporal Lance and some the two Marines from Failsafe, the two Marines, and discovering that they were actually named characters from DC history, Jason Bard and whatnot. It happened here. Zatanna summons a sorcerer. I put it in our write-up here. Summons the sorcerers of the past or whatever. It wasn't the sorcerers of the past.
Yep.
It was the goddess Isis, which is a DC Comics character, which I never realized. I mean, she's Egyptian, and they're in a country called Bialya, which is the Middle East. I guess maybe crossover there. I don't know. Back in the 1970s, she had a TV show, her own TV show, but then they also kind of combined it with the old live-action Shazam TV show as well. And what's great is that Zatanna says, "Oh, mighty Isis," backwards, which is what Andrea Thomas, who was the character, would say in the 1970s TV show to turn into the superhero of Isis. And Zatanna has so much backwards spellcasting in this one. She says, "O mighty Isis of the mystic scarab, give me your power." She also says, "Reconstruct the temple backwards and cleanse these champions backwards." And then the very last thing, when she's trying to prove whether or not like the control has returned to Jaime and Bars, her backward spell is "Reveal who controls your scarabs." And of course, their scarabs, shut down, or they take the armor off, and you can actually see the people. And that was the answer to her question. All of these things you can always find. All of the backward spells you can always find on, the YJ Wiki. We don't go over all of them all the time because there's just too much good stuff to go over. But pop over the YJ Wiki, and you can always see like the write up of what they're saying with their magic. It's crazy.
I love them. Props, so many props to her voice actress for being able to say all that stuff.
This thing is nuts. Ho igtim sisi fo et sitzim baraks evig em rui riwap. That's Almighty Isis of the Mystic Scarab, give me your power. I hope she got like danger pay or something for this dialogue.
Because it's so easy to type out words backwards. It is not simple to say them.
No, she does it so smoothly. Like, the Zatara actor as well. They both did such a good job doing those things backwards. So anyway.
Speaking of Zatanna, I love having her back so much. I love having her here again. I just love her. I really love having Zatanna back. And we're going to talk a little bit later about like why she's not around and having me shout into my microphone, but where's Zatanna for like 4 episodes in a row.
Right.
But it also shows why she can't be here, because she literally communes with a goddess in this episode. Yeah. And if you could just have that power on your team all the time, there are no problems this season.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Welcome to a fight. There's so many people we have to fight, and Zatanna's just like, done.
Goddess.
I'll
done.
Just go grab the people off the Reach ship and let's head out. No need to knock out Aqualad. We're just not going to have a plot this season.
Right. But speaking of that plot, actually, we got to talk about the McGann-Lagan conversation.
Yeah. This is like my favorite scene in this episode, maybe? I don't know. It's weird.
No, I get it.
Little scene.
But there's a lot going on in this scene, too. And some positive and maybe not so positive. I don't know. It's to be discussed.
We can get to that. I want to say that my favorite thing, there's one thing that I love about how this scene is handled, because I like this scene and I like how dramatic this scene is, even though it's just a conversation between two people. And I know people are probably like, of course she was happy that they broke up because she ships Super Martian and just doesn't want them to be together. Yeah, sure. Right. But I am so happy as a person that they framed it as being about her and about what she needs and about what she has been thinking about and being honest with herself. Not about it being about Connor, because it's clear that she still has feelings for Connor. It's clear this entire season, but this breakup is not about Connor. This breakup is not about Super Martian. This breakup is about McGann knowing that this is not a healthy relationship for her to be in right now. And it's everything from her saying, I'm not being fair to you and I am being selfish, and her acknowledging that it is her fault that she is in this relationship and that she dragged him into this in some way, without being entirely honest about her feelings and about why they were being together. And the line that I love so much in this and have loved since this episode came out is, it's not about him or you, it's about me. And I love that this is how they decided to frame this, because they easily could have framed it as, yeah, I still have feelings for Connor and I feel bad stringing you along, but it's not about that. It's about her and realizing everything that she has been doing with her life recently has been a bad choice.
Mm-hmm.
So much respect for my girl and her redemption arc. And yes, now that Emily's rant is over, Rich may speak.
Okay. I don't necessarily disagree with anything you had to say. I do think that it's unfortunate that Lagan's behavior was not addressed. So yes, absolutely. She knew, like, look, I am breaking up with you because I need to figure out what's going on with me. But that isn't, it is true, but it's not the whole truth. And part of the whole truth is, I think if Lagan was different, or Lagan learned from the kind of weird, sometimes creepy things that he was doing that were inappropriate, then he might not be her rebound guy. You know, she might care for him differently, but he just was going over the top and being very like he was going over the top, showing how much he cared for her and would do anything for her at any time. And I think she needed that because she needed someone to believe in her or believe in her. She needed somebody to not know that she tried to change his Superboy's thoughts. That's what she needed. And Lagan needed to be called out, and he wasn't.
Yes. She even says that the only reason they got together was because he made her feel better. And that is not why you should ever be in a relationship.
No.
But I agree. Lagan needs to be called out on some of what he's been doing. Yeah. And I think part of it, I have no confirmation about this, but some reading of stuff on Ask Greg, I feel like some of the problematic undertones of Lagan and the way he's acting may have been unintentional. Because like I am not sure if somebody has something out there where they can show that Greg and people have been like, no, we meant for him to be kind of as bad as he was. I feel part of it might be that they never intended for some of what he's doing to be interpreted as problematically as a lot of people, including myself, have seen it. Because it happens. There are some things where in our culture we just accept that that's how it is and we go with it. And there are things that Lagan does that I'm just like, no, that's not okay. You can't be that jealous and possessive and aggressive about things and expect me to think your behavior is acceptable right now.
Right. You can do it, but if there's no consequences to your actions, or there's nobody's pointing out to you that this is not okay, it's kind of the same debate with Wally in season 1. Like, the idea that he was doing those things makes sense, unfortunately, like in the world we live in, but it could have been called out a little more directly by some of the other characters, or at least mentioned at some point. Like, as long as it folded into the story and like made sense and that kind of thing, then, you know. With
Wally, and the difference between Wally's actions and Lagan's action for me is the way that the narrative treats it. And I wrote a whole thing about this on Twitter, and when this episode goes up, I will retweet that so people can read it. I wrote up a whole little thing about how Wally's actions and his inappropriate comments towards McGann and all of that is one of like the only times in the series that people tell Wally, at least indirectly, that he's doing something wrong. It is the only time when he doesn't like get support from the rest of the team. And how even if no one is directly sitting down with Wally and going, you're sexually harassing your teammate and you need to stop, they do have a more subtle narrative of everybody being like, dude, you're being really immature. Dude, leave her alone. Like, Robin calls him out on it. Artemis calls him out on it. They just don't call him out on it as directly as some people may have wanted. And I am able to understand the maturity and growth that Wally has in season 1 from that angle, because while none of the characters directly punish Wally for his actions, the narrative kind of does. The narrative calls him out, and nothing that he does is ever rewarded, whereas the things Lagan does are not only not called out by anyone, not called out by McGann, not punished by the narrative. I say punished in quotation marks because that seems a little harsh rhetoric there. We get one or two things from like Superboy being like, he's doing that thing again, whatever, rolling his eyes. But I feel like that is way less than some of what Wally got in season 1 to address what he was doing. So that is, to me, the difference between their actions. That is just my interpretation.
No. And I'm sure you put some thought into it, as did I. Because when this happened, I was like, it's this weird dichotomy. I'm so proud that she said, like, this has to, and it has to be about her. It should be about her. It needs to be about her. She needs to make the right decision for her. But that's not the only thing that was happening. Like, it's like she's blaming herself for all of what was going on. And Lagan wasn't registering any of it. I mean, he was upset, and that's, I guess, understandable, sort of. So, but he needs to own what he's doing. And I hope if they do show him in the next season that they figure something out, or they show some of the same kind of character growth that we saw even from like Superboy, you know, going from the end of season 1 to into season 2 as more of a leader and figuring himself out. So anyway,
I agree.
Well, let's dive into, unless you have something else, let's dive into our debrief.
No, I think I will sit back and stop having my. I have lots of emotions about that scene, guys. No one is surprised.
No one is surprised. Zero surprise. All right, Canary Debrief.
Stick around. Class is in session.
The biggest thing here that we're talking about in this particular episode is, where was Zatanna, right? Young Justice as a show has had to master this particular skill that many novels and shows, especially young adult and middle grade fiction series, just don't figure out. And that's making sure that there are viable reasons why your more powerful characters are not in a particular scene, episode, novel, whatever. We partially addressed this in earlier debriefs because it's common for the older or more experienced characters who have all the answers to, for whatever reason, choose not to tell the new kids on the block key pieces of info that could, I don't know, save their lives or help them figure something out. And usually, not usually, but when it's handled poorly, it's handled very poorly. It's the, we don't have time to talk about that now. When in the narrative, they clearly have time, or they really need to take time to talk about these things. So in this particular case, we have an entire series about younger heroes in a world filled with older, more experienced heroes. So in this particular season, the show's taken the core leaguers off planet, or at least some of the bigger guns anyway, off planet. But in this particular case, we're talking specifically about Zatanna. So you've heard both of us for many episodes now talking about, where's Dr. Fate? Where's Zatanna? What's going on? Like, we had this hint that the beetle was susceptible to magical energies. It was a subtle hint, but when Calder zapped him with his bioelectric energy that's been enhanced by the mysticism he learned in Atlantis. So the thought of like, well, if we have these beetles and these scarabs and all of these, you know, that kind of technology, then where's Dr. Fate? He showed up when the War World attacked.
Zatanna didn't.
Zatanna didn't, though, right? I don't know. So now we get at least some of our answers, at least for the past couple of months, she said. It took her months to figure out what was going on. So, however, we haven't got an answer to some of the other questions. So we know why the Lanterns weren't on Earth after the Reach were accepted or invited to the Earth by the United Nations, because once that happened, then by their treaty, Lanterns can never go back to Earth. But where was Hal and Guy, and I don't know if Kyle Rayner exists, like where are these other Lanterns before the Reach got there? I mean, the 2814 sector is huge, and that's where they're supposed to be covering, and so maybe they were just all off planet at the time. But it seems like if they'd gotten information that the Reach had arrived from anyone, then they would have returned immediately. So it's kind of a flip here, seeing what you miss and what you hit. Again, I wouldn't be surprised if someone points me in a direction of an Ask Greg where he answers this question, or something else. But I would like to know. Again, we have the opportunity for the comics, et cetera, to maybe fill in some of these holes and see where that is. But if you're going to be doing, particularly, please, a middle grade fiction or a young adult fiction story, and you please make a rationalization or an understanding of why the parents aren't there, or why the older heroes aren't directly involved, and make sure that hole is filled. Otherwise, it's gonna feel off from the very beginning of your story, and you don't want that. You were laughing the whole time, just nodding your head at me about...
As someone who reads a lot of young adult fiction and a general amount of middle grade fiction, The number of times I go, okay, but where are your parents?
Right.
Is astounding.
Right.
You can't just go off and have adventures and your parents not worry about you.
Right.
That's not how anything works. And I get that you need to do it because you want to have a plot,
Right.
but just give me some acknowledgement.
Yeah.
This is why so many young adult heroes are orphans, so they don't have to worry about where the parents are.
Right. There is a fantastic middle grade fiction series called Gregor the Overlander. And it's written by the same author, Suzanne Collins, who wrote The Hunger Games. Gregor the Overlander, I think it's 5-book series. I was shocked by how good this was. I had enjoyed the first book of The Hunger Games way back before they had, I think, even sold it for a movie. I'd read the first one. The other two hadn't come out, and I really enjoyed it. So I looked for other things that she had done. And one of the things that she does is she does have a reason why the parents aren't involved. But there are consequences also. So, Gregor goes into this underworld on accident and he gets trapped down there and he can't get out. Okay, great. That's why his parents aren't there. But when he comes back out, the idea that he's been gone for this extended period of time and missing is horrifying to his mother, who's already lost their dad and a bunch of other stuff. So have consequences of the actions show, and you'll make it a much more grounded, real and emotionally poignant story. If you can just hand wave it and just move on and say, why do you care? It's a crazy fantasy book about kids going into another world or whatever. You could do that, but you might be able to find a much more interesting hook if you stick with it and spend some time thinking about.
It reminds me of the Percy Jackson series also comes to mind, because that is greatly about a bunch of kids with no parental supervision.
Oh, yeah. I haven't actually read that one, so I'm not as familiar. I know the basics.
You should. They're a good series. I really like them. But one of the things is almost every book, I'm pretty sure every one of the original 5 novels had a quest that our main people had to go on. Our main characters went on quests, and they address very quickly. Yeah, I think it's in the first book they even address where Percy, the main character, is like, okay, why can I only bring 2 people with me? Can't I bring a bunch of people with me so that we won't, die? And they're like, if you bring more than 2 demigods on your quest, you will die. More monsters will show up the more people you bring, and it will be more dangerous for you. So they have mechanical reasons in the story why you can't just take an army on a quest. And it works really well. And they do address I feel like there's at least one scene somewhere in the books where Percy has to call his mom multiple times throughout the series and be like, I'm fine, I'm not dead, I promise. I'm good. Right. They have his mom in a later book, his mom has to drop them off at a mission that they're on because they can't drive because they're middle schoolers. So it's great. It's great.
Interesting. Yeah. And having that internal consistency, once you establish something like that, making sure you stick with that thought process. Or if you change it, that's fine, but you need to change it for a reason. And you need to lay the groundwork for it.
There's a later one where Annabeth insists on taking 3 people with her, so there's 4 people on this quest, and they get into some very bad situations as a result. And I can't remember if one of them does die, almost dies, but it's not good because you shouldn't have more than 3 people on a quest. We've established this, Annabeth.
I like that. I like it. Yeah, again, internal consistency across the board.
Yes.
Even with a fantasy or science fiction or whatever it happens to be, you can establish whatever reality you want. You just need to stick to that reality or explain why you change it. All right. Let's get on to crash what little mode we have left.
Indeed.
Tell us something we don't know yet.
Sorry, BB. We can't risk altering the time stream. We do that, we're all feeling the mode.
In Crashing the Mode, we will be discussing spoilers for Young Justice and the DC Universe in general. If you are spoiler wary, consider this your warning. Yeah, you made a bit of a good point here. There's those almost like comic book panel-y scenes where they're talking about kind of the things that happened in the past.
Styled. Yeah.
They seem to imply that Sportsmaster and Deathstroke work together to kill Ted Kord, or they fought him at some point and then later on blew up the lab. We don't know if those were 2 separate incidences, I suppose. But what's also interesting is that Sportsmaster and Deathstroke were working together. which is definitely very interesting. I don't know if it's really crashing the mode, but it would be interesting if Sportsmaster and Deathstroke had used to work together quite a bit or used to be old friends or something like that. That would
Best friends, somebody betrayed somebody, there was a falling out, somebody stole somebody's girlfriend. It's a whole thing. It's a whole tie-in comic.
Somebody's girlfriend. Oh, in the comics, the reason why Deathstroke doesn't have an eye is because his wife shot it out. Yeah, at least the original origin. I don't know what it is now, but his wife was actually his martial arts, like combat military trainer in the military, and found out that he was, really, really good at all these new types of combat techniques. She was training him. They ended up falling in love. They had a kid, blah, blah, blah. But the kid became in danger because even when he retired from the military, he became a mercenary. And so the kid, Jericho, was kidnapped by somebody who was his, mercenary enemy. And he hadn't told his wife any of this stuff. And so he ended up getting his son back, but not before his son had had his throat cut and destroyed his vocal cords. And that's why Jericho in the comics can't speak. But when she found out about all that, she had had enough and had gone over the top from other things that he had done and ended up shooting him right in the head. Took his eye out. But he'd had the super soldier serum at that point, so he didn't die. Didn't regenerate his eye, but he didn't die from the shot. And that's the original origin. Fantastic, right?
Wow. That was a lot.
That was a lot dumped on you right there. So yeah. When you're all, somebody stole somebody's girlfriend, I was like, oh, yeah, Deathstroke's first wife could probably take Sportsmaster herself.
Yeah, no, true. Because I know so little about Deathstroke. I'm like, he's the one with one eye who's really scary and was on Teen Titans.
Yes. Yeah, that was his first appearance, if I remember correctly, was actually in the Titans in the 80s. He was actually completing a mission that his son, who was a mercenary, his son that went by Ravager, it was a contract his son had who died on the mission. He took over the contract. And I think it had something to do with the Titans specifically, like directly involving the Titans. So yeah, I have to go back and reread it.
He was a major villain on the Titans TV show. So that was always my first introduction to him.
Right.
But this episode also has tiny crashing the mode for me that I point out because this is my job, where Nightwing, when McGann's asking where Connor is, and my tiny freshman heart filled with joy because I just want them to interact with each other no matter what, just please talk. And Nightwing's like, he said he was out with Wendy Harris, and McGann just looks so sad. And I also felt extremely sad as all of my hopes and dreams were dashed upon the ground because, oh no, Neverland is going to happen and I don't want it. Apparently Nightwing's got just somebody somewhere along the lines had bad communication skills.
There you go. You were blaming it on Nightwing here, and I'm like, Superboy could literally have said...
I can see Superboy just being like, I'm going out with Wendy Harris, because he just can't articulate.
Or maybe he said, where are you going? I'm going out. Oh, what are you doing? I'm, meeting Wendy Harris, right? And then Nightwing's just like, oh, he's going out with Wendy Harris, like a little game of telephone,
Be better at communication, guys.
But you know that Nightwing knows that there's a problem. Nightwing knows that they're not together anymore, obviously.
Yes.
And he was busy doing something else, but he could have phrased that a little bit more sensitively.
He says it so offhandedly. He's like, it's whatever. I'm like, it's not whatever to her. She cares.
It's not. And he in his mind probably thought like, no, they're not going out. He's just going out. Like he's going out, but he didn't realize that that's how it was interpreted. I'm going to defend Dick Grayson in this poorly phrased conversation.
I was gonna make a joke about how Nightwing dates so many people he just thinks it doesn't matter, but that's too harsh. That's not true.
Oh, that's not true.
I know.
Not true.
As I said, it's not true. But the whole reason this is in Crashing the Mode, and I'm bothering to point it out, is because the final episode of the season subverts all our expectations and does a little switcheroo and has Connor be like, nah, I've been going on dates with Wendy Harris with Marvin because I need to make sure that Marvin doesn't screw this up.
Right.
And it makes me happy.
I didn't think that he was like a third wheel on their dates. I thought he was just talking to Wendy, I thought, and like advising Wendy. I have to go back and listen to what he says at the very end, but he says something like, they've been dating and they've both been worried about screwing it up. I wasn't quite sure. I have to go listen to it now.
Being me, I can probably tell you exactly what it says, where he says, he's a little worried about screwing it up and she's a little worried he's right. So I've been acting as a buffer. And so he's as vague as anybody else on this show.
Oh, I could see that being interpreted. I see. Yeah. I got
He says, I'm a buffer. So I'm like, are you guys going out on like group dates? And you're just there to make sure that nobody's
kind of weird.
What is the situation, Connor? Can you explain?
But it's Connor, and Connor would be like, I don't know. Yeah, I thought it was normal. I don't know.
I'm just here to help people. Like, what do you mean people don't do this?
It's true. It's so funny. All right.
So yeah, wanted to point that out because that makes me happy.
Enough of that silliness. Let's get on with fan service.
I've admired your stance on animal rights for years.
So our fan service this week is some art from an awesome artist who on Tumblr goes by I Am Wise, WEIS. I Am Weiss, I Am Wise, however you want to say it. And they've just got a bunch of really fun fan art, a bunch of different sketches, a bunch of different AUs, including the gender bent AU that I think we shared on Twitter a while back and then never actually featured on the show as fan service.
Yeah, I don't think we did. It's very cool.
But that one's really cool. Has a bunch of different like little comics of gender bent scenarios that are cool. So they've got that. She has a cool little track and field AU that like splits up the core team and some of the peripheral characters into like 2 track and field teams at a high school that are competing. So that's kind of amusing because it's just another excuse to have Kid Flash and Artemis compete with each other, which is always fun in AUs, but it's cute. She's got a lot of cool stuff going on there.
There's also some heartbreaking stuff.
Oh yeah,
so
that one.
Just so you know.
If you haven't finished the season, don't look at her art though. Her art is full of spoilers.
Oh yeah,
some of it.
Spoilers.
So like throwing that out because we can't explain why the thing is heartbreaking.
We've passed the crashing the mode, but we probably shouldn't talk about it. But anyway, go check it out. It's good stuff. But just
fun.
Be careful that some of them might kick you in the gut. And with that kick in the gut, or kick to Sportsmaster's face, I think we can wrap up this mission and head out of the warehouse.
An emotional kick to Sportsmaster's face.
Always good.
I want it on a t-shirt.
The best way to support the show, of course, is with a 5-star review on Apple Podcast or your podcatcher of choice. Of course, also telling a friend, the easiest way to help the show. Ratings and reviews really push us up in the search strings and help new people find the show, as well as sharing out the show to people you know would enjoy it.
Yes. And please continue to #BuyYJComics on Comixology. You can actually find out what some of the most powerful characters are doing on the team when they're not in episodes.
That's right.
Ties into our Canary Debrief.
It's perfect.
Go buy the comics, friends. And consider buying the show on Amazon, on iTunes, on wherever you do on the internet until that DC streaming service launches soon, hopefully. You can also now use #YoungJusticeOutsiders when you're talking about Season 3 on all the social media. And if you want to help us get more episodes, more Secret Origins, more actual play podcasts, and all that other good stuff, please consider supporting us over on Patreon. For just a few dollars a month, you can help us do even more with the show while getting some great rewards for yourself. And remember,
stay whelmed, everyone.
You've been listening to Whelmed, the Young Justice Files podcast. Our hosts are Rich Howard and Emily Booza. Our editor and producer is Neal Powell. Our theme was composed by Emily Mio. Our logo was created by Kevin Bates. Whelmed is a fan-made podcast and is not officially affiliated with DC Comics, DC Entertainment, Warner Brothers Animation, and any other owners of Young Justice or its related source material. As such, these companies have sole ownership of all symbols, images, names, logos, and proprietary material related to Young Justice. Original content of this podcast is ours under Creative Commons. Thanks for listening, and stay whelmed.